Our sermon this morning has kindly been prepared by Reverend Peter Perrone, who was due to lead our communion service today at church had we been able to meet as normal. This is what he has written. Dear friends, I shall miss meeting you around the Lord's table this morning. Some ministers will try a virtual communion, but I feel I would rather point to all the other means of grace that God has provided to help us through these dark times. We have already seen by what have been posted by email and WhatsApp such encouragements to nourish our spirits and to point us on towards further sources. And I thank you all for your contributions so far. Sue and others are helping to keep our prayer life active and lively, and the scriptures still run like a fountain for everyone to drink from. The television gives us songs of praise, and if we can go online, there are even more services to follow. There are works of art, calls for prayer, for stillness, for thought and action to challenge us and inspire us. There is no limit to his supply. Now to our readings for today. The Old Testament lesson may have been written indeed for our own day. It is so relevant. The message causes us to give it careful thought. But today may I concentrate on the gospel and the verses around it. Matthew's narrative of the resurrection is rather different from that of the other gospels. He shows us people's expectations. The women expected to find Jesus' dead body, but the authorities expected something strange to happen, and so they set guards at the tomb to stop it. The disciples expected nothing, so they didn't even bother to go. In the event, what happened was what the woman could only describe as an earthquake and the act of an angel, as Matthew describes their excited report. But best of all, they met Jesus on their way back. But it's the way Matthew tells his story. He compels us to understand that we are in the presence of an unfathomable mystery here. We can only believe it if we are prepared to accept that we do not live in a world where explanations can be given for all that happens. We do not know everything. We are not fully in control. Who could have imagined a coronavirus would stop the world? Who would have believed it if some scientist could have told us what would happen? Who would have believed it if some prophet had foretold that all church services would stop in 2020? All this beyond our control. We do not know the limits of all that can happen in our world. Now we can understand how those women and the disciples thought that they knew exactly what to expect that Sunday morning. And we can understand how their lives were turned upside down at what did actually happen. We can also understand how it is that some people will refuse to believe. They refuse to believe that anything nasty could happen to them if they go out to the park in these days. In Matthew's story, the authorities paid the guards to say the disciples stole Jesus' body while they were asleep. They couldn't believe it any other way. But they never found the body or any evidence to charge the disciples with theft. It is Matthew's way of telling this that confronts us so starkly with the fact that the impossible can happen, and sometimes does. The tomb was shattered, not to let Jesus out, but to let the women in, so that the impossible could be seen to have happened. Then, to cap it all, Jesus himself was there, and they held his nail-scarred feet in their own hands. When they got back to the disciples, their amazement, their joy could not be hidden. Matthew doesn't tell us what happened to the glum faces of the disciples, but they got the message. They went to Galilee and they saw Jesus there. The authorities, for all their bribery, could not hush up what happened. And here we are, 2,000 years later, still telling the story. And it's a story that attracts even more stories. Stories of lives transformed by the activity of the living, risen Christ, still at work in his world, still at work in your life and mine. Today too, as all through the centuries, there are those willing to risk their lives in his service. Many have died, have given their all in their zeal to remain faithful. We are in wonderful company. May we be worthy to share our place with them. Bless you all. Peter. We sing again from Songs of Fellowship 736, Because he lives, I can face tomorrow.